Good beings, welcome to Beau Theory, Nazca Lines Decode. If you watch my moon topography and conception of bodies video, you will have seen a little bit of this at the third end of that video. However, I've done a little bit more digging and I think I have some really beautiful things to show everyone, including key insights into electromagnetism, electrogeology, the fractal nature of planetary formation and all things, as well as just some really cool stuff. So we're going to touch on Machu Picchu and the Nazca Lines here. We're going to go over what I think this Nazca Lines map represents as a world map and a 5D 2D interpretation of the plasma vorticity of all things, of electromagnetism, and how it's reflected as holographic information. So let's get into it. This is going to be based off of Frank Maglione Nicholson's work at the NazcaSolution.com. It's an excellent website tying the Nazca Lines to the ancient megalithic sites, the ancient equator, the Great Circle of Megaliths, as well as many volcanoes and mountains, which, it's just wonderful work. I have a slightly different interpretation here, but Frank deserves a lot of credit. He worked with Jim Allison as well and a couple other people, but I'm going to show you why I think it's a little bit off, and the main things we're going to focus on here are G and C and my interpretation of those. So this is what Frank says about G. To the northwest of Easter Island is the map's westernmost radial center, labeled G on plate 1. There are no geographic figures or geoglyphic figures in this part of the map to give ecogeographic clues to identify the radial center. Its general cartographic location, far to the northwest of Easter Island, suggests perhaps a location in the vicinity of the Hawaiian archipelago, such as its highest point on the volcanic summit of Mauna Kea. Now, I disagree with the Hawaii location for a couple of reasons, and we're going to explain that here. So, in terms of C, he places this in Cape Agulhas Lighthouse in southern Africa. And I actually place it on Antarctica. I know that sounds crazy, but to me, this indicates a map of southern seafaring mariners. And if we take it back to the fact that this is a collective wisdom created over thousands of years by many people, there's just a very strong possibility that it was made while Antarctica was free of ice, at least on this Antarctic peninsula. So that's just my 2 cents on that, and I'll get into that a little bit more, but as you can see, it very closely overlies. And what I just want to say is that the Nazca Lines are either an elaboration of Polynesian stick charts, or Polynesian stick charts are a echo of the Nazca Lines and that navigation technique. And these stick charts were memorized before they went on trips, and they were left at home. And so that's why I think the Nazca Lines are actually like a giant academy and school for ancient mariners, and they would have to memorize this stuff. And we just don't have a conception of how that would work because we don't have to memorize anything. I mean, people don't even know their phone numbers anymore. So moving on. This is my worldwide projection, and as I said, this is holographic 5D information, and I do believe that this map can be turned in multiple directions and scaled and from different places to give you more insights. And so right here, you'll see that point C is not all the way over at Antarctica. It's not possible to do it all in one projection. And for other reasons, I believe that this encompasses the whole world, and that it centers on Africa and the Indian Ocean and other places where early mariners would be more likely to go, including straight across the Atlantic. And it focuses more on ocean currents. And the reason I place the G on the map at the Marshall Islands is because it is the best place to launch to catch the equatorial countercurrent back to South America. And this was not my initial interpretation. I actually wanted to place it on Fiji for a reason I'll show you in a minute. But after I kept messing with it, it became pretty clear that it really should be the Marshall Islands. And I'll show you a little bit more about that here. So that's a little bit cleaner view. Now, the southern tip of South America, or the west coast, shall we say, is caught in a gyre. And as much as I like Frank's interpretation that these are probably llamas, and indicative of a place higher in latitude, closer to Cusco or Peru, I'm not 100%. And there's different types of animals that these could be. And so I kind of just messed around, and what I found was that these might actually be seals. And the llamas that are on low elevation are actually more towards Patagonia because of the ice. Normally they like to be up at high elevation. So the islands that are down there are called the Juan Fernandez Islands, and it's a chain of islands, and one island in particular stuck out to me, which is Robinson Crusoe Isle, and it has fur seals on it, and these fur seals have ear flaps. So before European settlers, there was estimated to be 2 to 3 million fur seals, and my thought is that if you were going to be navigating the islands, you would not want to go to an island with fur seals, or at least not that many in a canoe or Polynesian boat. It just seems kind of like a scary proposition to me. I don't know. But this island is only a few million years old. Its highest point is 3,000 feet, and it did show signs of human habitation prior to Europeans, even though Polynesians supposedly never went past Easter Island. And here's the thing. When you look at the ocean currents in this area, it's hard to think that anybody was going directly from Lima or Chile or any of these, Bolivia or any of these places, the Nazca Lines, straight to Easter Island in a direct route, because it's right across a gyre. It's right across an ocean gyre, which is not the kind of way you want to sail. You want to sail with currents and use those currents to your advantage. And so I think that it would make much more sense to take a northern route coming out here and then catch the wind back, and then use these lines to come back this way. And that's just my thought. This doesn't line up perfectly down here to the Juan Fernandez Islands, which are over here in this little line. But if you were navigating, you might run into them that way. So it's just a thought. I don't really have a firm conviction on that, but either way, it makes more sense to me that people would have gotten blown around in these gyres and gotten lost and ended up down here somehow, and then settled up here, and then they were attempting to find their way back to the west, maybe getting shuttled down to Easter Island. It's just the timing of a lot of these things are kind of weird, and we'll get into that here in a second. But again, this is my big map projection of the world. This box right here, Frank places as the Amazon, and this one he places as the Atlantic. So he extends the projection out all the lines out and does some really cool work. But I think that these represent the main sailing channels for ancient mariners. And let's just get into a little bit more. The likelihood of some of these currents that are going up and down being trade winds, I think is very, very high. Um, Especially when you consider this part right here. And if I zoom in, hold on a second. Zoom in over here. There's actually a spiral right there. And that really represents the top of the world. That's Kashmir, and that is where a lot of the ancients who came down from above the Black Sea, the red-headed giants and whatnot, and the Aryans and whatnot, they came through here. And this was a big center of learning for a long, long time, especially 2,500 years ago and before. It's dried out now, but and then there's the monsoons, and as you can see, these lines are coming straight off the Horn of Africa and shuttling you down to Sri Lanka, and then going past, and more air currents coming down this way. This actually represents a little bit of a dead zone. I'll get into that in a second. What else can we see on this map? Don't ask me why this is all up here. I haven't gotten into all my China maps of my correlations yet, so it's secondary to me at the moment. But if we come over here, you can see that this is the Mississippi. This is the ice sheets. This is a perfect match on the Gulf of Mexico. And then, you know, obviously this center here is where you're trying to get to. These are places where that are really important that you're trying to get to and from. You might be going from here up to here. You might be going from here to here. It really just depends. If you're going straight across, then you're going to take the Orient and follow the channels directly. But there's a lot more here, so let's keep moving. This is the plate view. What's going on? Oops. Sorry guys, I'm doing this a little bit differently than normally. I don't normally just screenshot everything. So, but I wanted to be able to zoom in because the details are important and you won't be able to see them if I don't. So I had to do it this way. Apologize. So what we're going to do in this presentation is show how the electromagnetic vortex pattern is actually represented in the Nazca Lines, in the plates of Earth, and in the moon. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I say that the moon mares are what form the continents on Earth, and I'm going to get a little bit more detail on that. It's going to be pretty cool. These are going to be some maps that I haven't really delved into yet. And you can see the echo of the moon behind here. It's not a perfect projection because of the way that maps kind of stretch at the edges, so it's really more accurate to the center and in the middle here. The farther you go out to the edges, the more that these lines would have to be adjusted and used navigating on the horizon. But to me, this is the general echo of all of them together. And what I just want to give a basic outline of here is that these three red circles represent the main thrust of geological breakup between South America and Africa. And in my theory, whatever you want to call it, the moon is approaching in a cyclical way that it's so 3D and 4D and 5D and it echoes, but there are patterns that repeat. And so the approach comes after it breaks from a mutual tidal lock over the Pacific Ocean, which you can see other videos. I have lots of those. That's the biggest connection between Earth and Moon is in the Pacific and over the entire basically surface of the Moon that's facing us. And then after it whittled itself down, then the mares became secondary thrusts for the breakup of the crust. Initially, the two were moving around so fast that they're still molten, and they had to get a certain distance apart to cool. And so then after that, the moon swings back through and does these things. So first Africa, then South America, then the Gulf of Mexico, and then it works its way up North America. So there's that, and there's the image with the galaxy overlaid, and here's just the moon with the galaxy. And as you can see with this, there really are echoes there on the moon on when you look at it as a flat surface and project this thing onto it. And I don't know, to me it's becoming more and more clear the more I look at it, the pattern. And so this central part that isn't really distinct represents that central vorticity. Now, I'm going to keep moving because we got a lot of stuff. As you guys know, I've proposed that the ejection of lunar material actually creates a yo-yo d-spin effect, and that helped propel the moon away, and that's why we find all these round spheres. I believe that they're part of this process that eventually washed up on shore and smoothed out. Keep going. The problem with the mapping is that it's happening over time, and it's so anything I propose can be turned a little bit to find other things. It can be expanded to find other things because the pattern is going over and over again, and it happened a lot. And the only way I'm going to be able to really map this well is if I can do it with H3 mapping, because it uses mapping over. It's a mapping of change over time, and I'm really hoping to get involved with that, but it's tough. But what a lot of I'm showing you is basically shadows of two balls like this interacting. So it's a lot of overlay, and it's complicated, but it's worth it. So in my mind, there are galactic scales, solar planetary scales, lunar mare-to-continent scales, and then lunar crater to earth mountain scales. And that includes volcanoes and islands in the Pacific and all over the earth. And I'm starting to map direct correlations between specific lunar craters and features on Earth and what their major formers were. And today I'm going to present Machu Picchu. So stay tuned. My friend Buddy James presents these nesting toruses as something he calls the Doherty set. And if you want to learn more about how all that kind of electrogeology, electro connection, Birkeland currents, check out the Electric Universe, listen to Buddy James, go over to the Thunderbolts. They'll all have great information to help you catch up. So this is my latest projection. It's a little bit different from the other ones above, but it actually, I think, is really more money. And I moved G from Fiji to Aristarchus, which I was reluctant to do because I really wanted it to be Fiji, but it's not. So Aristarchus and the Marshall Islands correlate. In this case, Aristarchus also correlates to the Tamorin Basin in China and the Tibetan Plateau and the Yangtze River, but that's at a much, much smaller scale. That's just the plateau. So this is cool because this line cuts right down through here. This is framing this. This frames this. I don't know. There's a lot of lines here that are just like, it makes me wonder whether the map was created by looking at the moon. And I mean, it could have also just been created via studying wind patterns in a canyon that was a plasma canyon. It could be from ethnogen insights during hallucinogenic trips. But to me, it's the universal pattern, and this just shows if what I'm saying is correct, it shows so much wisdom that anybody who wants to argue it's aliens can go right ahead. But I think it's collective wisdom of electromagnetic energies on Earth. So these are the main craters there. Now, in terms of the overall moon, let me zoom in here. These are the main mares, and I'm just going to briefly touch on this just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. And what I'm talking about is crust displacement and the cause of plate tectonics. And I'm not going to get into expanding Earth or not here, but there's a lot of evidence in my mind that the moon caused the Earth to expand. But either way, there is very clear evidence here in what I'm presenting that the moon caused the initial pole shifts by its approaches and literally like pulling the moon down and pulling the Earth down and rotating it so that it could hit at the pole and eject enough material to finally escape. All these other small ones at Africa and South America didn't eject enough material, and so it kept returning. And in that process, it approached the North Pole from the Hudson Bay. And the only thing you really need to know is that that was the final trajectory. This green circle is the Great Circle of Megaliths. And so this is why I think that the moon is the main force of axial precession on Earth. Now, I could go way into this because there's lots of other levels of how this happened and echoes. And it's, like I said, it's a matter of different phases through time. And so this is just a quick view of the main basin on the moon, all the little lunar craters, and how it overlaps on a map of Pangea. And you can see that the arcs, the plasma arcs that are close to each other, are straddling pretty much all the continents. So moving on, I do think that the Nazca Lines are likely a map to the stars because they reflect a universal distribution of mass and electromagnetic energy in any toroidal electromagnetic system. Plus, the ancient mariners used stars to navigate. So, like I said, we're putting all this together. Knowledge is not satanic, electromagnetism is not satanic, and preying on people's fears, keeping them ignorant, and collecting fear loosh is bad. So even if this was made by aliens, they were probably stranded here on Earth trying to figure out where they were and get the hell out of here because this is a backward-ass planet. Now, I think it's likely simply a map of ocean currents and land masses made by ancient mariners that has holographic, topographical information encoded from 4 or 5D down to the 2D level. And so, like I said, you can turn the map of the Nazca Lines in many directions to see different things. And if you were an ancient mariner memorizing a map, you would have to be able to use it in a 3D-dimensional way that allowed you to connect it to the stars and the horizon and the changing latitudes of all that. So let's get into the little map of the islands. A map of the currents. And as you can see where I placed this is the direct route across, and then you basically get to the corner and you got to hook down. And then over here, this is the main channel going across this way from Africa. And I don't know who's going that way. A lot of these people wouldn't want to go this way because it's more stormy, I think, and you're more likely to get looted. But that's just my guess. So let's move on to this. And again, the Marshall Islands are the fastest way to get back to South America. And if you got to the Marshall Islands, you probably got sucked to South America. And so there were probably some early settlers who went that way. And then to get back, you had to cruise up here and then cut down. Or if you were down here, you could do that. But you can't just like launch off of here. And if you launch from here and you get sucked up here, then you're in a gyre again. So it's like you got to really pay attention to ocean currents if you're driving a canoe across the ocean. I mean, it's just, you can't ignore that stuff. So these are just other views. I don't know. Here we have all the ocean gyres, which you would want to avoid if you were sailing the ocean on canoes or even on small ships. You really don't want to go to these areas. And as you can see on the Nazca Lines, they're pretty empty. There's not a lot going on, except maybe over here, which you can make a case that these lines are different than the rest of the map. Let's see if I can show this a little bit better. Now, I want to talk about when this all occurred, because as you can see, we made it to, or they made it, the Polynesians made it to Kiribati at 3,500 years ago. And then there's like a gap here. You see this? Like they didn't make it out to any of these places for another 2,000 years. I don't think that that's terribly realistic. I think that whoever got here went across, came here, and then made it back over to here. And I'm just guessing on that. I don't know for sure, but it seems plausible to me that someone could have gotten pulled across. And what I want to say about the Marshall Islands is that, according to what I'm looking at, it looks like some of the atolls were submerged. And this is from a time when the Ice Age had lowered sea levels. So but yeah, this is the gyre, and you just, like, look at the way it's going. You're gonna go from there. You could have came here, but there's a lot of ocean out there, and it's scary. There's a lot of ocean up here too, but it just seems more likely that somebody would have been riding the equatorial cross currents to me. And like I said, looping back here along the Nazca archipelago, or I forget what it's called exactly. And then those are the little islands down here, which someone could have got lost on. So let's get into the mare aspect, which is in South America. It's the Sea of Fertility, or the mare-to-earth-continent, or whatever you want to call it. And what I want to say is that this is the ancient equator, and the Nazca Lines are right about here, maybe up here. And so this blue outline is from here down here. This is the easiest way for me to outline these. I've done some other maps with this inverted, and sometimes it looks good, sometimes other people tell me it doesn't. So I went back to my original, which is just the regular inverted, and I just really want to focus on actually the red circle at this time, because I've already done a map on the other stuff. So this is where that red circle lines up. And guess what's in the center? Yeah, you know it, Machu Picchu. So when I look at these maps and I find a correlation like that with, this is Langrenus crater. Here's another view. I apologize for the blue over the writing. I added that in later. Again, the Sea of Fertility, Langrenus. And so this crater, if we zoom in and we overlay them, is going to show us some interesting stuff. It is about 180 kilometers wide. And so what I did was map out about 180 kilometers over here around Machu Picchu and in this circular formation. And as I've said before, the lunar craters are flat because they are primarily anodes to Earth's cathodes. And so these formations occurred a long time ago, and the idea that it happened in the last 12,000 years would be hard to justify. And as much as some of the evidence does point to that, I still tend to believe that it's a cyclical cycle with smaller events recurring at the same locations again and again as asteroid recursions or electromagnetic discharges from Earth at those places. I mean, once a volcano is there, it can let off electromagnetism. After it's formed, it can keep going, and it's a channel from the inner Earth to the external atmosphere, and so it's not going away, and it's always going to be able to express the energy differentials of a change in pressure, which is a lot of what geophysics is about, as well as planetary formation and the alignments of planets and how they affect us and each other. It's a lot about distance and pressure. And so Fiji, in my mind, matches up with Copernicus, as I said in my other video, just throwing that out there. But let's do a little overlay quickly of Langrenus. So here is Machu Picchu. Here's the crater. And so again, like I said, the electromagnetic universe is scalable and fractal and infinite and holographic, and it's all the same pattern from top to bottom, as above, so below. And so there's a crater scale for these features, there's a continent scale, and there's the planetary and galactic scale. So there's that, and again, here's the scaling that I'm talking about. And so let's go over to the Marshall Islands, and I want to make my case here because I think it's important to dig in. It wasn't easy for me to figure this part out, and it's not really obvious. So this is what that little section of the Nazca Lines overlaid over the Marshall Islands looks like, and it doesn't look that great, honestly. Let's be real. But if we zoom in and we keep zooming in, we'll find something actually really interesting, because you can also rotate this. And like I said, if you're in different places, especially if you're in one of these axial node points like the G or the C, you definitely can rotate it. And this information travels, it's like light in a mirror. So it's like looking in a mirror. You still get information about what's behind you, even if it's backwards. And you can do that with holographic information and fractal information. You need to be able to look at it both ways, and that's the whole idea of the looking glass, is that a mirror or a looking glass shows you something completely different, and you can actually use it to predict the future. So here are the atolls that these lines line up to. The yellow circles don't line up to anything, but they lined up to the same atolls when flipped the other way, and just in a normal orientation. The farthest thing up here is Wake Island, and that's kind of what the point goes towards, and you don't really want to go up there. There's not a ton going on, and the currents are going west above the Marshall Islands, so you're just going to get kicked back towards the Asia area. The green lines represent the major lines on the Nazca Lines, and in this orientation, this one is north-south, and the other one, I'm not exactly sure where it goes to here because I didn't trace it out, but it's a way of orientating. And the goal would have been to get to Nauru and then up here. And you're trying to get anywhere here, basically, because once you get into this circle, you can jump on the current, which goes across here. So below here, this is just a cleaner view of the map. And oh yeah, what I think is really cool is that this line right here, this is actually a modern survey line from underground. If you zoom in underneath the Pacific Island, you'll find some areas where there's more detail. Those areas of more detail that are lines are where they've actually surveyed the Pacific Ocean in detail. So they're not some kind of formation, they're just echoes of our technology at this point. Anyway, if you overlay these lines back towards the Solomon Islands, which I did just because I was curious about what it would look like. And I think it makes sense because, again, I think the yellow lines here represent trade winds or something else. But really, what I saw was that the shortest route to the Marshall Islands would have been to come across here and jump from these islands and go up, trying to get to here, here, and then up. But the fact that it clipped these two islands right on the edges, I thought made sense to me. And so I really think that the Marshall Islands are the G on the Nazca Lines, although, like I said, you can look at it different ways. Here's a little bit more better view of what that route would look like, trying to get past Nauru to the Marshall Islands from the Solomon Islands, and you're fighting the trade winds there. So, you're going to be trying to go as hard as you can because you want to get here so you can cut that across. So that's my interpretation of that. And like I said, I really thought that it was Fiji, mainly because I was working on the Fiji Copernicus thing, and this pattern to me just it echoes this completely. But I haven't looked at it too much more, but I don't think that that's the correct interpretation anymore. So again, here's just the channels where we go across, coming back here, and again, like I said, you're coming across here, and you kind of want to come down, and that's where you want to go. That's the main spot. So let's keep going. I've already showed you this. And again, the Marshall Islands, there's not a lot above it, if that is the point on the chart, and there's not much up there in the Pacific. It's just a big ocean gyre. Hawaii is on the top of those channels going above the equatorial countercurrent, and so the ocean's going across here. So it's really hard for me to imagine anybody going from here to here, but it's possible. It's just a little bit scary. I would rather be flowing with the current, personally. Took a peek at this already. Here it is without the map behind it. Like I said, they're pretty empty. It's a little bit closer view. Sorry, it's getting repetitive. I didn't realize I had put those slides up earlier before. Let me get to this stuff because this isn't as easy for people to see. I know not a lot of people agree with my assessment of the lunar mares being continent formers. I think I'm the first one to propose that ever. Other people have done a lot of electrogeology and pointed out different features on the moon in terms of electromagnetism, and the anode-cathode stuff is straight out of the electric universe. That's not something I figured out. I got that from them. But I think I'm the first one to really tie it directly to the moon and specifically to Earth's crustal formations, because a lot of the electric universe people are dealing more from a mythological, informative perspective, that this is recent past and that the humanity saw this in the recent past. And I just think that it's holographic information that you could find looking at a flower or mythology or in your head with pressure waves. Like, there's so many ways to see the nature of reality is as this electromagnetism, and it's really hard to say that mythology is one thing and not another. It's almost always holographic too. So to say that it's specifically one thing and that it's the stick man, to me, is troublesome. But here, this is as faded as I could get the galactic, but you can really see that there's some real congruence here. At least I see it with my stigmatism. So there's just the clean moon, and it looks very different, obviously, than if you look at it as a globular projection. or just like a small piece of it. You can see the streamers. These are actually ray craters, and so they look different on a flat map. They look curved, but I think that this is a universal pattern, echoed on the moon, echoed on the earth, echoed in galactic formations and flowers and plants, in ocean currents and in wind patterns and in storm patterns. So like it's hard to say it's this or that either, you know? Like I can project the the galactic formation in a lot of ways to make it look a little bit different. And there's a lot of echoes, you know? This is a slightly different projection where it's more spread out, and now it's cupping this instead of this. But the general pattern, I think, is becoming more clear. And this is just inverted image. I think this is my original. No, this is the updated one. And then this again is my preferred interpretation of the Nazca Lines on the moon. And a couple things to point out over here. This red line goes straight down Russia, and you can see that it would make sense in terms of that river there above it. And if there was a huge plasma arc going between these two places, to me it makes sense. And when I look at this Africa, South Indian Ocean area, I know a lot of people have pointed out that that looks like a crater. And in my paradigm, craters return to where the moon approached. So there should be craters there, and I believe that there are. And some of those are going to be electromagnetic connections between the Earth and Moon, and some of them are going to be real craters from debris that was shed from the Earth and Moon, mostly the Moon, because the Moon was losing mass in order to get smaller and escape. And so I find that a lot of major asteroids and meteorites from later times show up on the edges of these places where I connect the mares to the Earth, including in Texas and in Canada and Chicxulub crater in the Gulf of Mexico. So we're not going to get back into that stuff. We're going to go over to Africa today, and we're going to show you how the plates separated. So we're going to start with the Mare Crisium, which is the Mare of Crises, and Proclus crater. Proclus crater, this is it right here. It has the second highest albedo after Aristarchus. So that means that the edges of the crater are really shiny. And I'll basically explain how that relates to mineralogy a little bit, but let's just take a look at this. This is what, just to give you an idea of what a plasma arc might look like. Going here, spinning. And so if we overlay all these maps, that is the red dot there is Proclus, and there's the Sea of Crises, Sea of Fertility, and that is, what is it? You know what it is. It's right at the bottom edge of it. What should be Atlantis on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Yeah, it's exactly it. So keep going, Mare Crisium again. This is the outline, and this is how I work to try and suss out what's what and where the connections make sense and don't. And honestly, I make a lot of mistakes. I'm going to show you what I find in the end, but there's a long process of me working through these things to find these connections and overlaying a lot of information. And my first interpretation of this was that the Mare Crisium was the Congo Basin, and I do see some evidence for that. However, I actually think that it identifies more with the Central Rift Valley here. And if we go back to this and then go back to here, so this right here equals all this gold. And this right here equals all these diamonds. So I'm just showing you that one version. I have half a dozen or more other ones of Africa, but I'm not trying to give away where all the secret mineral wealth and gold and diamonds is in the Congo, so that it can go get exploited. You want that information, you can pay me. Anyway, so if we just look here, and this is where I kind of lean towards confirming it this way. I'm going to zoom in. That's the Congo, and then this is the Central Rift. And so when I overlay them with the map of mines, like I did for oil wells in Texas, I found a decent match here, I think, and there's a lot of other potential that you can go check to confirm or disprove this theory. I have so many different ways that this theory is provable, and I don't have the resources to do it, but there's a lot of evidence and a lot of money to be made from these maps. Anyway, this is again my view of Quetzalcoatl, who I believe can be used as a navigation tool. I think that the image of him is probably an echo, just like the stick charts is, of a much more complicated mapping system that isn't necessary today. I mean, nobody knows how to use stick charts except for some Polynesians. Nobody knows how to navigate by hand or using hand signals like they used to. Nobody knows how to use these old maps the way that they used to. Everything's just technology based. And so the information, as soon as new technology comes along, the old information gets forgotten really quickly. And the thing about Quetzalcoatl is, he was known as the Lord of the Morning Star, which is usually Venus, but can also be Mercury. And it was used for navigation. That was the main function, was navigation. And this finger gesture that he's doing is actually an old gesture that people used to use to navigate. And the fact that he has a chin strap pointing right to it, to me indicates that that's sort of like a horizon guide for his eye. And you can see his eye looking down past the chin strap to the fingers. And so that to me is a way of aligning and navigating. And so I know that this is a newer picture of him, but this whole snake and serpent, feathered serpent, these is all about wind and ocean currents and magnetism to me, which are all holographic and echo each other and all follow this vorticity pattern. So to me that makes sense, and I think that this image of him, of Quetzalcoatl, can be used as a sextant. And I think that if you were to use it with the Nazca Lines as I'm describing, it would be a great tool for aligning different currents and wind patterns depending on what you know. And I don't know it well enough to say it, but to me that's what these things indicate. You want to get to the ocean currents and avoid the cross currents and line it all up. And so you would be navigating using your fingers and lining up to the stars, and you would need some way to orientate this map if it is holographic and it can be turned in different directions. So that's what I think about Quetzalcoatl and the legends of him being an ancient mariner who came by, taught everybody some stuff, and then pieced out. I think it makes sense. It sounds like someone was mapping the whole world, and if you know some of the ancient stories about that being tied to maybe either Egyptians or Phoenicians, I think it's probably valid that this map was made by someone a long time ago, sailing the entire world. It's just a different interpretation. But the reason I put this one up is because I think that the earliest Ice Age mariners probably came from Lake Chad down to here. And, there was lots more islands in here to hop out to and go fishing. And you could have easily gotten swept across. And once you got swept across and knew about that, then you had to get back. And so maybe you go up here and come back that way. All kinds of different things to ponder with that. And I'll leave that for another video and for other people's speculations, because it's not my primary focus. But my primary focus was the pole shift and what happened to Atlantis and Mu and sea level rise and the disaster cycle. And so, as I've said, there is recursionary debris around these different impact sites of where the mares approached the continents. And if you see that, it becomes very clear that this probably is true, what I'm saying. And it can be interpreted as something that happened in terms of a capture of the Earth capturing the moon. It can be after formation from accretion, or it could be planetary birth. It really doesn't preclude any of those scenarios. In fact, it really just opens up the door to everything again, even if I have my opinion on it. But what I would recommend is not worrying about Orion and aliens, and just try and look at something inverted and see things backwards and see if it makes more sense when you flip things upside down. This is a version of Quetzalcoatl that I flipped upside down, and I saw one of these inverted faces, and I don't know if it's real or not, but it's interesting to look at and it's interesting to consider. So this is the overlaid corners on G, and some of these really match up to connect. Let me see if I can pull one out. Yeah. Just like pull it out, and then so I don't get a ton out of this overlay right now, but that's what's important, is to try looking at things from different perspectives, twisting them, not getting attached to one perspective. So for example, this C point, which I mentioned before, if I line it up to Antarctica and put the former North Pole at G, there's some evidence that this makes sense as well. There's certain channels coming through here that it might make sense that this is Lemuria. Let me just zoom in here so you can see it a little bit better. This is basically this or this or this. And I don't know if that's Lemuria. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But these are about finding clues, and this is just my 2 cents. If you want to look for Lemuria, I think that it's in the Southern Ocean. There's also Mu out in the Pacific. Lots of different candidates for that. It's just a little bit tougher to place it, I think. But yeah, that's basically what I wanted to show everybody today, and I hope everybody appreciates this interpretation and takes something away from it. If you do, please subscribe. Please support my work. Find me on Patreon. If you want me to do something specific, if you want mining advice, let me know. I'm taking retainers, because what else? But yeah, that's about it, guys. These are some other maps where I've tried different projections, just to show you guys how many different things I tried. And like I said, you can do these in a lot of different ways. And so in my main map that I was showing you guys, I don't know if you can see it here, hold on. I basically pegged the spot C to New Zealand. I couldn't remember where I put it, but yeah, that makes sense to me. So that's it for this video, and I'll just leave you with these images again of Machu Picchu and Langrenus crater, and remind you that the universe is electric, and the universe loves you because it's infinite, and it can do that.